welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 199th episode, our guest is Eugene Smith. Eugene Smith was born in 1957 in Detroit, Michigan, and grew up in Fresno, California. He was working in Georgetown, Guyana, for People's Temple on November 18, 1978, when he lost his mother, wife, and infant son in the mass murder-suicide at Jonestown. Repatriated by the U.S. authorities on New Year's Eve, he broke a $50 bill stashed in his shoe to buy breakfast for himself and a fellow survivor. Returning to California at age 21, Smith faced the daunting challenge of building from scratch a meaningful and self-sufficient life in the American society he thought he had left behind. He retired in 2015 after 22 years' service with the California Department of Transportation. He lives in the Bay Area. On May 21, 2021, Smith's book, Back to the World, A Life After Jonestown, was published by Texas Christian University Press. A quick programming note. As I mentioned in the episode, I was a reporter for the Ukiah Daily Journal from 2007 to 2009. During that time, I had also had a chance to interview fellow Jonestown survivor, Tracy Diaz, formerly known as Tracy Parks. For a link to that story, check the show notes. I also had a chance to interview Rebecca Moore for that story. Rebecca Moore lost two sisters in Jonestown and is now Professor Emerita of Religious Studies at San Diego State University. With her husband, Fielding McGehee III, she co-manages the website Alternative Considerations of Jonestown and People's Temple. She was instrumental in providing context for that 2008 article and connecting me with Eugene Smith for this episode. Thank you again. Anyone who is even remotely interested in the good, bad, and otherwise of People's Temple is encouraged to visit their website. It is truly a valuable historical resource. Finally, I want to thank Tracy Diaz and Eugene Smith for taking the time to share their stories with me over the years. And now on to the show. Again, thank you for making the time. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
It's very well done. I thought it was an important perspective that, like you pointed out, we haven't heard before. And it isn't just about what happened and all the parts everyone knows. It's about what happens, how does life go on and how does it not go on, and that's really a tale that we don't hear as much of. And I think that was an important piece of the story. So I'm glad that got included.
Excellent. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But what was it like to work with a co-writer, an editor, a collaborator on this story? Because I mean, this is some super personal stuff, and this is someone else. You're entrusting a lot to a person if you're co-writing a story like this, I imagine.
Well, it was different in the sense that I wanted someone who had been in war zones before, or someone who had been either a reporter or have lived in countries that were black and or Africa itself. And the reason I wanted a war correspondent, so to speak, was because I didn't need anybody being shocked when I'm walking them through a story.
Mm-hmm.
I need them to move on, because them being, I respond to, hey, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. I didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to just write it as if it's a normal day.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of interpreting what I'm saying. So that was, after that, it wasn't that difficult in that sense. It was difficult in other ways in terms of reliving the incidents. Going back and looking at my FBI file. Because that's a whole 10 years.
Yeah.
So those things were difficult for me.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I can only imagine. But I read your writing too on the Jonestown Institute website, and yeah, I see how you're a very like I told you, you're very kind of lyrical, poetic. You're very rich in detail. I can see how I'm an editor in my day job. I'm a newspaper editor, so I understand the utility of someone being able to put things in an order, in a fashion. But you definitely provide the here and the now and the what's happening of it. So I think your style is very. It was easy to read, and I can I can also see how an editor would help put that in an order. You know what I mean? So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What was it like in general, just to, like you mentioned, it was hard in other ways and reliving things, but you weren't somebody that talked about this in public at all, from what I understand. For decades, this was just not a part of your life you shared with very many people. So that was like like you were probably were thinking about things you had just put out of your mind, I imagine, for a long time. So that was probably very difficult.
Correct.
Hmm.
It I always took notes. Even
Mm,
after I got back, I just took notes, just random notes.
that's
But I
important.
always, but I kept them.
Hmm. Right.
They were in no particular order. Whatever that incident was for that day or that flashback was, I'd be sure to write it down and note it. And so over a period of a couple of decades, um, compiling all of that gets strange,
Hmm.
and it leads you to other scenarios,
Hmm.
such as like in the book, there's only 15 pages of that FBI file, or the FOIA file, excuse me. The original document is 364 pages.
I read that, yeah. That was probably, that was probably an interesting day when the first time you cracked that old FBI file open.
Yes, it
Wow.
was.
I'll bet. I'll bet. Wow. Yeah.
Really?
People that are listening, this guy has his own FBI file in the back of the book. How many books can give you that? None. Never read a book like that before.
And the thing is, I wanted people to. There's a couple of ways. I wanted people to understand that mistakes are made and mistakes can be made, but there are also abuses, and and sometimes there's a fine line between the two, depending on what the threat is.
Mm,
Coming back to the U.S., or some of us were considered threats.
right.
So the level of attention was much higher than it would be for a regular member of a church, so to
Hmm.
speak. Um, so I had to take that into account also.
Hmm.
And the reason for putting the FBI file in there, or those 15 pages, was so people would read that. In fact, my instructions for reading the book, if you want to hear them,
Hmm.
is you read the FBI file first.
Mm.
And the reason you do that, you need to see me through their eyes
Mm.
while I'm telling you what's happening to me at that moment.
Right. Yeah.
Um, that, that takes on a whole nother perspective in terms of how you read the book and certain things that you retain about, or certain chapters you retain. When
Hmm.
you read it from cover to cover, it reads fairly fast.
Hmm.
There are some moments moments of exhalation, as well as moments of, oh my, no more,
Hmm.
Um, but by reading that, it's almost like there's a certain bias you end up with, good, bad, or indifferent, at the end of the book.
Mm.
Having, if you read the FBI file first, those biases are erased.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, I totally didn't do it that way. I read it from cover to cover. I guess I did it wrong. I'll have to go. You know what? I'll do it in reverse this time. Although I've read the whole thing now, I don't even know if it would work. But maybe it's too late for me. People that are listening can still do that, I suppose. But
Absolutely.
but that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. Well, if we could though, I'd like to go back to the very beginning of the story for you, and that goes back to your mother and how you would describe her as kind of a spiritual seeker. Somebody that was very. She went to a lot of different kind of churches. She sought out a lot of different communities, I guess, before she settled on one. Can you talk about that and also like faith healing, because that I grew up Episcopalian, so I don't have any concept of faith healing in any sense. So, can you talk a little bit about your history in that respect?
Sure. I was introduced to Catholicism, Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, Jehovah's Witness, non-denominational, obviously People's Temple, socialism to a certain extent. I'm not quite sure what my mother was searching for other than comfort now that I think back at it. The comfort to know that there was someone that would protect her outside of herself. That holy being or beings, whatever they, he, she, or might be, would protect her and those under her care, me. I think that she wanted me to have a religious foundation, but she gave me enough freedom to make a choice. Now, that choice wasn't until 7th grade, but I was still allowed to make it.
I see.
Up until between 1st grade and birth, there was the Mr. Franklin's church in Detroit, Reverend Lofton, some
and you were speaking of Aretha Franklin's father there, C.L. Franklin?
Yes, correct.
Right.
And so there were a multitude of different aspects of religion within months of my birth. And then married, I became a Seventh-day Adventist in 1st grade, or just prior to 1st grade. And children are comfortable in whatever environment they're in until they see something different or they grow up and look back at it. The Seventh-day Adventist, what I appreciated about it was that you were always being challenged, not in the religious sense, but in the sense of you must learn. You must know how to read. You must know how to write. It used to be reading, writing, and arithmetic. The new math hadn't came out yet.
Right.
They, we said prayers in class. We saluted the flag, but religion wasn't so much. It took a second seat to education. It just complemented your education. You weren't being indoctrinated. At least that was my experience as being a Seventh-day Adventist. However, there was the white Seventh-day Adventist church, and there was the black Seventh-day Adventist church. But then I reflect back, whatever is your normal as a child is your normal.
Yeah.
Until you see something different or you reflect.
Of course.
And I had no concept of races, not until like 7th grade. I just didn't. It wasn't harped on. It wasn't talked about. It just wasn't. It wasn't something that was very important. I wasn't in an environment where my color or ethnicity made a difference. In terms of People's Temple, I think she saw that as a safe haven for me. Only because I think I was stretching her limitations in terms of my interest, in terms of my curiosity, in terms of my wanting to know more about the world, not just this city, this county, this state, this continent, but the world. I want to know about it. And even though she taught me to read, and I was reading in kindergarten, she only went to the 3rd grade formally. I think I was stretching her limitations, and she saw People's Temple as a safe haven in the sense that there were enough things there to pique my curiosity and enough to keep me interested, and it still had enough religion to like, hopefully he'll be okay. He doesn't have to pray every day, but he needs to believe, that type of thing.
Yeah. Okay, I get that. That makes sense.
That's how mothers are.
Of course, 100%.
For me, it was a candy box in the sense that, wow, let me see, there's construction, there's a wood shop, there's electronics, there's a photography lab. I could take a sermon or two.
Sure, absolutely. 100%. But and this is you're in Fresno at this point, right?
Yes, Fresno, California.
Gotcha. And so what year is it that you first encounter Jim Jones in People's Temple? Is this 70? Is it 73? Is that right?
72,
Or 72?
going from ninth grade to high school.
Gotcha. Okay.
And my mom basically said, "You need to go listen to him. You might find him interesting." And to a certain sense, he was, but he was actually less interesting than the other young people I saw on my age. How engaged they were.
Mm-hmm.
They seemed very focused. The conversations were sharp and precise.
Mm-hmm.
They seemed to have a certain amount of intelligence that was just naturally bright.
Mm-hmm.
And some learned.
Mm-hmm.
They're both equal with me, but I just noticed that about certain folks. They weren't shy. They weren't using the most recent vernacular.
Mm.
They were using standard English,
Mm.
which I was appreciative of because I'd been teased because that's what I used. So that again was an environment that was rich for me.
Right.
So that piqued my interest enough to take a trip up there.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about to Redwood Valley at this point.
Correct.
Right. Now, I have to stop the story here and tell people that I lived in Ukiah from 2007 to 2010, and I worked at the Ukiah Daily Journal as a reporter. And I'm just, for my own sake, interested.
It's
okay. Yeah, I know. I'm curious just to know, you didn't spend a whole lot of time in Redwood Valley. You mostly went from Fresno to San Francisco, mostly, right? That was
correct.
your migration, but you did, I guess, spend a summer in Ukiah. Is that correct?
Part of a summer.
Part of a summer, right? And what year was that? Right. It ended pretty quickly from what I read in the book.
That was 72, going into my first year of high school. Like in those days, ninth grade was still junior high.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So that was a summer of 72.
Yeah. Well, I'm just interested. What was your impression of Ukiah and Mendocino County in general at that time? I'm curious just to know what it was like back then.
Well, you had the they made plywood there, plywood and laminate.
Masonite.
Yes. So that was a really big employer. We were a big fish in a small pond in terms of having the 12 Greyhound buses traveling down State Street and whatnot. For a lot of folks, I think they considered the temple a really viable threat. A threat into the sense in the sense that they're going to change the way we are here.
Okay, because I was always wondering how much of that was real and how much of that was Jim Jones' invention or trumping up, or like maybe it was there but he made it more than it was.
No.
You think it was the hostility was there from perspective.
Not to support him in any manner whatsoever, but that could have been embellished in terms of how they felt about us. And in some cases they made that very well known.
Okay.
And it was an area that wasn't, I wouldn't go so far as calling it a sundown city.
Okay.
But I'd go far enough to say it might have been sundown for other folks that weren't part of the temple.
But you guys rolled it as one, as a group, so they were less maybe likely to. Well, and I think that's an important point, because you bring that up in the book, and that it was like, if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us, and that's appealing to people that are otherwise not, if they're caught out alone, they might not have that kind of protection. And that's correct. That's major.
And the thing is, People's Temple could be a threat on so many levels. Physical being the very last. What I mean by that is you had teachers, you had academics,
Mm-hmm.
You had PhDs. You had people with master degrees. You had people who worked for the coroner department.
Mm-hmm.
You had ex-police officers. You had former gang members. Um, you had people that were politically connected.
Mm-hmm.
You had folks that were on so many levels that threat, there was no reason to be physical.
Right.
And there was a whole team of attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes a long way
Mm-hmm.
in knowing that there's no end to how they're going to fund these attorneys, because they will be funded no matter what you put out as the adversary.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I have a meeting every Saturday and Sunday, and I'll take my donations and I will fight you on Monday.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned this now and also in the book. There's some pretty bright people in this group. There are people that, and as I told you, that was kind of the connection I've drawn with the more I've learned about People's Temple in general, is that the concern about, social, racial, class, justice, all that kind of stuff. I'm not a communist, of course, but I'm not going to go that far. But that's in my wheelhouse. That's what I believe. I believe in all that kind of stuff, and in that respect, I can see what the appeal would be in that. And obviously, a lot of kind of powerful politicians, as you mentioned, agreed. They're Harvey, George Moscone, Rosalind Carter, the list goes on, and it's
you got the president flying in, he's flying in on Air Force One, and he wants to speak to Jim Jones.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
right.
So whatever the idiosyncrasies might have been, things like that normalized it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No matter what you were seeing, certain that's not supposed to happen. That shouldn't be happening. But hold on,
Mm-hmm.
I have this. It was I'm looking for a word. I think the word is didactic. It was so opposite,
right.
Extreme in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that after this happened were like, kind of like, oh my gosh, no, don't make eye contact. Don't, please, no one remember that I was like in the front row at that one thing, please. And then never talked about it again,
Exactly.
Yeah. I was watching that panel that you were on C-SPAN, that thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I forget what his name was, the other survivor that was there. He mentioned
John
that.
Todd.
Yeah. He said he was out in San Francisco one day and he just saw like Willie Brown, and Willie Brown was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And then he like went off as if nothing happened in between that time. And this was after everything happened. It was like afterwards in San Francisco. It's like, "Hey, buddy, good to see you. Go on about my day."
Right, gotta go.
Wow, yeah, gotta be somewhere else. I gotta see a man about a thing. But like nothing happened. Yeah, but they helped legitimize it for sure. Absolutely, 100%.
And the other thing is, your typical American doesn't realize there's some really simple things that we take for granted that are socialist inspired.
Oh yeah.
Such as healthcare, Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't always been there.
No.
We had to grow as a country to understand that, well, not everybody gets the same chance, and they should have a comfortable life afterwards.
Yeah.
After working 30 or 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so when Americans say they don't believe in socialism, it's like, well, you need to look at yourself first. And there might be aspects of socialism you don't agree with, and that's fine. I'm with you on that. But to throw the bathwater out, that makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Throw the baby out with the bathwater. Excuse me.
Right. Absolutely.
As you say, I'm lyrical.
Totally. Absolutely. Man, you're just to me, I'm 38 now, and when I was the ages that you're talking about in this book, you're a late teenager, early young adult. I thought I was so old at that age, and I see kids that age now, and I'm just like, they just look like infants to me. Like, they don't look like adults, and I felt so old at that time, and it's just amazing to think all this happened to you at such a young age, and after all this happened too, you had a whole life to live after that, and as you say, this whole move to Guyana kind of comes out of nowhere for you, right? After you'd gotten married, and your wife is pregnant now, and now it's like off to Guyana, I guess. And this was just one day, right? They just sprung this on you, I assume.
Not exactly
No, you were
that.
expecting it.
More like a few days.
Oh, okay.
It's just like you'd be working in the temple, and then somebody come, hey Jim, let me speak to you. What's up? Yo, man, your ticket. Like, what do you mean? You're gonna be going in. You're gonna be going in X amount of days.
Mm.
Oh.
Oh.
All right. Well. Okay.
Mm.
It wasn't a surprise that Ollie went. I think the surprise is that it actually happened.
Mm.
And I know that sounds conflicting, but it's really not. My assumption is that we'd go together, meaning that she'll be going.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that she was going before me put me on red alert from then on. I was not a nice guy around for,
Imagine.
for a few weeks there. I was not very good.
Right.
But like I say in the book, I was lucky enough to have folks that were my protectors.
Oh, yeah, I definitely wanted to talk to you about that, because Jack Beam is somebody that you highlight as someone that kind of served in that role. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And now he produced music, right? He was for the group or the temple. Is that right?
That's actually Jack Beam Jr. His son left early on.
Okay. Because I have an album of People's Temple that I found at a Goodwill in Ukiah. I think I guess it would be his son that produced that. Right. Okay. So you're talking about his father. Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Jack Beam Sr. used to work at Ukiah Motors, I believe.
Interesting. Okay. Gotcha. Wow. Okay. Blast from the past. All right. Your wife was also musical, right? She was. What did she play an instrument? Did she sing?
She sung.
She sung. Gotcha.
Okay. Originally, she sung gospel with her family. When her family joined the temple, they as a family didn't sing together very often, and Ollie became a solo artist at that point. And then when they left, obviously she was by herself, and so she would do solos.
But one detail in the book that I really couldn't get over is that you had 365 cassette tapes that you took to Jonestown with you, and they took them right away from you right away, huh?
Exactly.
That's that hard. I'm a music lover, and that breaks my heart, because I would do exactly the same thing. Bring 365. That's exactly the thing I would do. What did you have? I'm so curious. What did you have on those tapes? What kind of music?
I had the Last Poets. I had Gil Scott-Heron.
Wow.
I had the Watts Prophets. I had James Brown. I had John Coltrane. Sonny Liston Smith. No, not Sonny Liston Smith, but Sonny Rollins. Had some African artists on there too. Sun Ra. And then a cat naturally cool in the gang. The Stylistics, Tavares. Some Supremes. Gladys Knight, Aretha Franklin, the Fifth Dimension, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, Lambert Hendricks and Ross, Lambert Hendricks on his own, Annie Ross on her own. Yeah, because I was into, I've always been into vocalization and rhythm and rhyme, and I I like poems put to music, which is what Gil Scott did.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I also like war being declared in a poetic manner, which is what the last poets did.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But also there's Thelonious. He
Mm.
was just as radical.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached as many spectrums as I possibly could. I had a lot of Latino music, definitely Santana.
Mm.
Um, let's see, Airto, Airto. Uh,
Mm.
wow. Oh yeah. Well, back to America, Tower of Power, of course.
Mm.
I mean, Grover Washington Jr.
Oh, I was just
Earth,
listening to him the other day. Yeah,
yeah,
he's great.
Earth, Wind and Fire.
Ooh,
Um, and the list goes on.
that's a rad list. Somebody should write that down. That's that's really good. Man.
In the
Well,
Commodores.
oh, nice. Absolutely, 100%. That's incredible. So I want to know what your impressions of Jonestown were initially, because I'm sure there were aspects to it that were good. I mean, you got to see your family, however, maybe not well, they might be looking in some ways. You're with the people you haven't seen for a long time. That's got to be good. Did you want to leave right away? Did you think you could make it work there for at least a little while? What was your initial impressions? I mean, of course, you're really mad about losing all the music, I'm sure, but beyond
Yeah.
that, I guess.
Well, I pretty much described that moment.
Right.
My first couple hours, and somebody's getting their ass whooped up front,
Yeah.
and it's so dark coming into Jonestown. When you look to the side of the headlights, you can see nothing. You can't see anything. So even though I knew the jungle was there, I couldn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there, and all I got is a pocket knife,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know where I'm at. I'm not even quite sure what direction I'm pointing now, because I don't know if it was overcast or what that night, but I remember I don't know. I couldn't see the moon, so I couldn't get my directions down. I was completely lost.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes into a white night after we've been there or listening to sermons for a couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can I use expletives on your program?
Do whatever you need to do.
Like, what the fuck is a white night?
Mm-hmm.
Who's under attack?
Right.
For what?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Again, I got a pocket knife.
Yeah.
So
yeah, even if they are coming, what am I going to do exactly? Like,
and I've been on the water for 24 hours, and I still got my sea legs.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's like, oh yeah, it's time. Yeah, it's time to get out of here. But I looked over at Ollie,
Mm-hmm.
and she was 8+ months pregnant.
Oh,
so there's no way. There's no way. Even if I knew my way, I couldn't run her through the jungle like that.
No.
And so that was, well, anyway, that was a moment of panic or controlled madness.
Yeah.
A little bit of both.
Mm-hmm. Most people that came to Jonestown had to do a certain, like, wasn't it 30 days of labor in the fields or something when you first got there before
Correct.
you could do anything else? But you managed
Correct.
to not do that. And you mentioned, and I actually wanted to mention this earlier, you mentioned several times in the book that you didn't let them punish you in the way other people did, that you drew lines in the sand with people and said, you're not going to do this. How did you assert your individualism in that much of a collective setting? I know you said you had protectors, but I mean, I imagine you were pretty set.
It's that was a simple one. I've never I've never been behind bars in terms of being held.
Mm-hmm.
I've visited folks behind bars,
Mm-hmm.
and knock on wood that I'll never have to be behind them.
Right.
But you have to make yourself known no matter what environment you're in.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in an academic environment, you excel.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a sports environment, you outrun, you outthrow, you outpoint.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a movement, you have to create a environment around you that makes it less than comfortable for them to challenge you.
Hmm.
And when they do challenge you, there is no limit in terms of that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've exhibited that, and I get the feeling you're trying to get to where in the book where I'm in Mexico with the temple and
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. 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 Well, that's a good example.
Yeah. So anyway, I punched Stephen Jones in the chest.
Yeah.
And because we're doing this, you're going to do it with us. And he says, "Do you know who I am?" No, it didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But that set up the remainder of my journey. Because when I moved into the temple, I was put in charge of the construction crew. Jack Beam did that.
Right.
And allowed me to create a crew.
Mm.
And that was in. Now I remember we're all kids. We're like, they're 16, exactly. I'm 18, etc. And those 2 years were like a decade. It's like between 9th grade and 12th grade. It's a lifetime between those 4 years or 3 years. Mm-hmm. So I was asserting my power in the sense that I control a crew. If one of my crew go on the floor, we all go on the floor together. Mm-hmm. And I didn't allow them to be challenged. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, the game was you want to have commendations at the Saturday night meetings, but it's public. Oh, thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing that. It's like, and we got those. Mm-hmm. So that put me in a position to not be a bully, but it put me in a position never to be bullied. And by going, if you're gonna punch out the leader's son, only person left for you to punch out is the leader himself.
Mm. Right. Well,
so
yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, it is interesting in the book how you talk about how that scene that you describe, because it's like you mentioned this in the book. It's like people think, oh, it was all one happy family. It's very flattening. Time is very flattening. But it's like you had these rival cliques, and you thought the Jones boys were stuck up, right? They were.
Well, I felt they were spoiled and a bit privileged.
Yeah, there you go.
It didn't seem very obliged to mingle with the peasants. Now right. that was an observation based on me being there a year or so. Whereas they were raised in it.
Sure.
So I didn't know what their dynamics were, but their dynamics, whenever I didn't really care about that dynamics unless they impacted me and mine.
Sure.
And then that was the conflict.
I see. Gotcha. But you asserted yourself. You're a hard worker, and I do think that's one thing that I do admire about the book is that even though that this entire experience was very traumatic, you managed to take away positive lessons for the rest of your life, and kind of what you were talking about there is your philosophy of working hard and stepping up and doing what other people don't, and. That was definitely something I'm sure that was encouraged in people's temple and probably served you well, I imagine, in the years after, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I learned a lot of things because people's temple was always politicized. And that was always a topic of conversation. So not growing up, but being in the temple for those few years, you learn politics. And there's no such thing. Well, I shouldn't say that. Politics can be dirty. They can be really dirty or somewhat dirty, but they're dirty in the end. And PT allowed you to observe that.
But anyway, getting back to where we were in the timeline here, you went to you were in Georgetown. Your son is born. How long from the time you get there to the time that you go off to Georgetown to work in the customs? How long?
4 months, and then after that, I was in Georgetown from August until the incident.
Gotcha. Okay. Because were you trying to get to Georgetown? Were you angling for a position like that? Because obviously you're good with organization and logistics at this point. So was it that no, they just told you to go?
In fact, I was trying to stay away. I was trying to stay away from Georgetown and not even be interested in it and focus on getting Martin to where I could take him take him out. But once they said that the prime minister is going to be having this and that in Georgetown, and that the basketball team would be going into Georgetown at that time to play the international team, and they wanted Ollie to sing, and it's like perfect. Perfect.
Where were you planning to go if you were going to meet up with her and go? Like, what was your plan?
My issue was to just walk off the stage. She walks off the stage. She walks back. We leave the building, and we go to an embassy. That's it.
Gotcha.
It wasn't complicated.
Okay. All right. I didn't know if you had a final destination, just anywhere, I guess.
It was, and the thing is, whatever PT was, there were certain lapses within the temple itself, in terms of foresight and forethought. But that's only after looking back at it versus being in it at the time.
I'm interested in what you wrote about Congressman Ryan. You think the timing of the trip was obviously not ideal. Maybe if he had held off or done it in a different way, it might not have gone down like it did. What's your thoughts on that?
No matter when that trip happened, it would have been a bad time.
Gotcha. Okay, so it wasn't because it happened then. It was just maybe bad for you personally because you had this
right.
plan.
For me personally,
right.
It was bad time.
Gotcha.
Because had he not came into town, Ollie would not have been held back in town with the other entertainers to entertain him. They would have already left, and I might have been on the plane with him going back to the U.S.
Right. Right. But yeah, so this is pretty much where the book picks up right at the beginning, and it starts right with this day, and you're at the movies, and it all just seems like such a whirlwind. You go back to Lamaha. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Lamaha Gardens.
Just like Yamaha with an L.
Okay, gotcha. Lamaha, yeah, got it. And then you see what happened there, and then you're taken into custody, right? You're put in this Guyanese jail, which just sounds horrific. And then
not quite. Stephen was put in jail. Stephen Jones.
He's on the basketball team.
Right.
And
I think Chuck Bikeman later on. All they did was they interrogated us at the house, but they interrogated us over a couple of days.
I see. Okay. And at what point, because I mean, you say that, is it Odell Roberts that said you were the one that was going to be on this quote unquote hit squad and they need to like watch out for you? Is that the source of that story or that information?
Yes, Odell Rhodes.
Rhodes, excuse me. Yes, Rhodes.
Yeah.
And so he provided that information. You have a very memorable scene later in the book where someone knows both of you apparently, and is like, oh, I know someone else from People's Temple, and they have this awkward meeting later on in life, and you have to pretend like you're like, oh, okay, hi, how are you? Like later on, and I'm sure that was very strange all that time later. But anyway, he at the time was the source of that information to them, and that's why they perceived you at that time as to be a threat.
Right. He said he had overheard Stephen give me instructions, and it's like, well, I haven't been there since August. This is November. The basketball team just came in a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago. So what did you hear since you're still in Jonestown? So, and so I mean, if agents had done their due diligence, they would have seen the timeline didn't connect. But they were in panic mode, somewhat like the insurrection at the Capitol.
Right. Well, they think they're going to lose everything, right?
I mean, there's a certain irony to that, in a certain irony and a certain resemblance. So,
right.
Everybody was panicking.
And
then all the alphabet agencies, they had responsibility to protect those individuals and or families that they were responsible for. And it's what? You flying them back to the U.S.? Right. You crazy?
Another detail that I love from your book is that they made you. I don't love this. This is obviously super annoying, but but it's a good detail for the story in that they made you pay the $300 like 20 years later for the flight from some city to some city, and it's like, wow, thanks for that.
Like when the U.S. government flies you back from a foreign country, they're responsible. They fly you back to the U.S. Wherever you land at, that's the end of their responsibility.
Wow.
You owe them after that. So they landed in New York so we could be interrogated, and I had to pay from New York to L.A. And I'm thinking $300 in 1979. I mean 1978. Yeah. That's a pretty pricey flight.
Yeah. That's first class right there, if anything.
Yeah.
Oh wow. But after this too, as you put it, the alphabet agencies, they let you know that they're not done watching you for quite some time. But yeah, they like came to your workplace, right? They made their presence known. I mean,
they made their presence known
a long time after, right? Not just in the immediate term.
Well, that was probably like maybe 6 weeks after.
Okay. I see.
And then because I was still in LA for all intents and purposes at that time. And so we just wanted to speak to Eugene. Really. But yeah, they made this known, and you got to remember the technology in the late 70s and early 80s is nothing like we have now in terms of monitoring. And that's a long way of saying that there was more physical monitoring then, which now would be electronic monitoring.
Sure. It's very analog. Like they'd literally be outside your house.
Right, exactly. Turn that boom mic on.
Right. Exactly. But yeah, so they're watching you, and I'm sure that there was just an era of a panic too, because the hits just keep on coming. With Mike Prokes and Jeannie Mills,
Chris Lewis getting assassinated,
right?
Multiple arrests, and just, I mean, it's weird and it's strange. But people were just, it weren't that they were acting out. They were just tired of not being able to react.
Mm.
because society never gave us a moment to just give us a moment, okay? Because we
Hmm.
can't respond to you, so all we can do is react to what's happened to us, and we weren't even given that privilege.
Oh yeah. Well, you describe in the book first coming back to America in the airport, and there's just people on all sides just yelling at you for no reason. Like
Right.
you survived. Shouldn't they be happy if they're this upset about the people that didn't make it? Like a couple people made it. See, like,
And it's
but
like I
no, they're
wasn't
mad.
even,
Like just boo, boo
and
to
it's like
you.
I wasn't there.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, well, all right, well, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I faced it and carried on.
You certainly did, and I have to just like, again commend you for just saying, look, I still have a life to live, and I'm not gonna let this stop me from going forward in my life, and you found the strength to carry on and thrive through your own perseverance and hard work and single-mindedness, and it just seems like it's such a inspiring story in that way because it just is unfathomable, well, for those of us who haven't gone through something like you've gone through, that you could pick yourself up and keep going. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
How where are you at now? Where are you living these days? So
I'm living in the Bay Area, um, East Bay,
nice.
and yeah, it's fairly comfortable. Unfortunately, the fires that are going on in Upper California,
Oh man.
uh, it's the size of LA now. That fire
Wow.
is 450,000 acres or something like that. 437,000, I think.
My gosh.
Burnt up a small city there. I think
Mm.
the city was less than. Don't quote me on this,
Hmm.
world. I think it was less than 400. It was a small town. I said city. It was a town of maybe 400 people or something like that.
Yeah, I think I saw something
And
about that.
so they had news crews in there, and when you looked at it, only thing left were the sidewalks. Everything else
Mm.
was gone. Just done. Just little little piles of this and that.
Mm.
So, wow.
I
So
know.
that smoke that's been burning for weeks now has been because we've been having an onshore breeze all along the west coast. It's been blowing as far east as New York.
Okay. That's why I
Well,
feel a little bit lightheaded here in Indiana lately, I
so
think.
so, and so now our offshore breeze or whatever it is gone. So today I got up and I thought it was overcast and actually it was
Oh,
smoke.
oh man.
And then I turned on the news and it's, yeah, this is a bad day to breathe.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I remember there was a lightning complex fire when I was in Mendocino County, and we were making like air filters and box fans, and it was yeah, it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, the really important question I have to ask you though is, what is your favorite season of The Wire?
Oh, oh, wow. I guess when they start talking about the corruption in City Hall,
Mm, yeah.
because then you get the dealer, you get the police officer, and you get the politician, and they're all on screen equally.
Yep.
Like one's a little dirty, one's real dirty,
Yeah.
and one just denies it.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed that reference in your book because I also love The Wire. It's one of my favorite shows ever. So good. Yeah, it's hard for me to pick. I like the one with the docs. When they're
Yeah,
yeah, that's a good
yeah.
season. I like season 4 with the kids. I think that's a really good season. I didn't like the 5th season at all with the serial killer. I could take or leave that whole plot line, but I love Amsterdam. I love the first season. Yeah, it's a great show.
Are
Very
you
good.
watching The Shy, or did you
No,
watch The Shy?
no, I've never seen The Shy. Is it good?
Well, if you liked The Wire,
I did.
you'll like The Shy. I mean,
Hmm.
I think the finale's this weekend, but I'm sure you can get it on demand.
Oh yeah, I've seen
It,
ads for it. Yeah.
yeah, it's real interesting. I think some of the same writers. I'm not quite
Oh,
sure.
neat. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, has David Simon done anything else? I haven't seen anything else from him, television wise.
I can't think of what it could be.
So he did. What was it? Homicide: Life on the Street. No, he didn't do that. What was that one?
No,
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 The
no,
Corner. No,
that was
the
Hitchcock
Corner. The Corner. He did The
guy.
Corner,
Right.
and then he did The Wire. And then Treme. Yeah, I watched a little bit of
I like Treme.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like The Wire level, but it was good.
Right, and I think what it is, I went in with a bias.
Sure. I mean, how could you not?
It's like, yo, man, if you can't step up from The Wire, I don't know if I'm interested.
Right? After seeing Omar testifying in court, where do you go from there? I mean, that's like the best.
Yeah, exactly. or Omar gets killed over. What? A kid?
I know.
But speaking of Omar, I forget his real name.
Mm-hmm.
He has gone places since then.
Yeah, he's done in other stuff too, hasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's in Lovecraft.
Oh, see, I didn't never see that. Was that?
Yeah. He's a father in Lovecraft.
Oh,
it's interesting. It is really interesting because you can see Omar in the character, but it's a different character altogether because there's nothing street about him. Everything's professional.
I know. Omar is one of my favorite characters ever. I love him.
And I think he still says indeed.
Oh, indeed. Oh man, that's a great show. But all right. Well, last question before we go. I always ask, what music have you been listening to lately?
But I listened to some John Crane
nice.
as of recently, and some Miles Davis, and I thought it had some rhythm was in there. It must have been the Ohio Players or something.
Nice. Very good. That'll work. Well, thank you so much for taking the time this evening. I'm glad we finally got to do this, and you're welcome to come back on anytime, and we can talk about whatever you want. We can talk about television more. I've got plenty more to say about television and movies and all that kind of stuff. But
right on.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Everyone should read your book. I enjoyed it greatly, and it's.
You got to tell them the title.
Yep. Oh yeah. Well, it is Back to the World: A Life After Jonestown by our esteemed guest Eugene Smith, as told to Ethan Casey, and you should get it right now from TCU Press in Fort Worth, Texas.
Right.
So absolutely.
So when does this play?
I'll send you a link. It can go up as soon as probably tomorrow because I have to go to sleep. But I'm sure my kids will wake me up at bright and early at the crack of dawn. So
yeah, that's late for you. Okay, I'm sorry.
No. I haven't slept in 7 years, so I'm all good. I'm very used to the night owl and the early mornings. So
right on.
Excellent. Well, it was a pleasure to speak with you. I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope to talk to you again soon, sir.
Thank you. You will. Please send it to me. I'm looking forward.
Absolutely. Great job. Appreciate it.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye. Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, RSS, and now Spotify. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. If you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Also, if you want to call or text the show for any reason, the number is 317-674-3547. Until next time.